coaches and everyone, welcome to ACSM Online Week 2020. My name is Viviana Wijaya. I'm a coach and serving as ACSM Communication Director. So today we are having the privilege from Marianne, ACSM President, to give the talk for today. And her topic is clean coaching and how to use the clean coaching to let the solutions emerging from deep within. Let's welcome Marianne.
Thank you, Viviana. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm a coach and executive coach and coaching supervisor. And I've been using clean coaching from time to time. It's not necessarily the main tool I have, but it is something that is really helpful when people are stuck and we don't really understand where it comes from. So I thought that as you are already well equipped with plenty of tools, I will give you something that could enhance your coaching if you happen to need it. So that will be expanding your portfolio. So how will we do that today? I will share with you about how does the clean coaching works, what's the philosophy behind it, and then give you a few examples on how to do that. And then we'll try to give it a try. So either we can have one of you being the coachee and I coach using clean coaching. But what I would love to see actually would be to have one of you daring to use the clean coaching and coaching someone else, so that later on we all can share our insight, share about this experience, and learn from each other. So we'll decide a bit later, but I want you to think about, am I willing to give it a try, or why not? So just to have an overview first on what clean coaching is. So the name of clean coaching doesn't mean that that's the purest form and everything else is dirty in coaching, right? It's not meant as an insult at all. It's just a form of coaching where we tend to have as little intervention as possible. Because it actually came from David Grove, who used to be a psychologist, very active in the 70s and 90s from New Zealand originally. And he, being a psychologist, he was working with victims and people who had trauma. And I would invite you to watch the webinar that Rosalind did 2 days ago about the end of life and grief coaching, where she really insisted on making it a very safe place when people are shocked, where we really want them to allow to have everything that's welcome and that could happen in that space. And this is where she really mentioned that silence is probably the most effective coaching tools that we have. And then really tenderness and gentleness in the way we question. So clean coaching process from that same philosophy where we want to have that tenderness, that gentleness, and be so far from judgment as possible, where we let the person process through and where actually our own perspective may not even be relevant. So therefore we tend to be as far as possible, as close as possible from them, but as far as possible in their own topic. So what did David Grove create? It was actually a series of questions and metaphors. So just like we did with Frances when she 2 days ago on the webinar, sharing about the shapes, the line, and the colors, it's about finding an object, finding a way to represent And we did that with Lily Seto and her magic box too. A way to take distance, represent, have a symbol, so that we're actually talking about the symbol and not so much about the person, so they feel much safer, and little by little things emerge that were not obvious straight from the beginning. What's happening usually is that our coaches may not be in such a traumatic state. And this is really great because we are not equipped for that. As coaches, we are not psychologists, and we will work with people who are definitely way more stable and who are not in a suffering mode at that time. Yet traditionally, most people are starting from A and they want to go to B. And we will use any kind of model, helping clarifying where is the destination, where is their reality, finding different options, and then helping them to create an action plan. And for most of the time it works, but sometimes this direct way, using the GROW model or using some others, is not really giving as much results as we want. The person has been trying many things, and no matter what, it's still not working. Sometimes I work with coaches in supervision and tell me, I want to find clients. I did a lot of things on Instagram. I did that workshop. I did this. I have this website. I have this newsletter. I have. They've done plenty of things, and still doesn't work. It's not that they're not capable, because they've been successful in many other fields. But what could happen is that there could be that there is an internal value conflict, that there is some unconscious belief that is blocking on their way. And we need, as a coach, to help them find a way so that they can reflect on their own thinking. And when they notice that it's actually a belief, all of a sudden they also notice that it's not necessarily very helpful. And from that awareness, we can change, reframe, use all the modalities that you're familiar with when we work with beliefs. So it's about really helping the person finding a way to what he or she already knows, but it is not yet accessible by the logical and the conscious mind. So we need to find a way to let that emerge from our unconscious mind. And for that, the judgment is absolutely not welcome, because as soon as the person feels judged, they'll be even more like a shell that's closing up, and there's no way they can go deeper, and even less to remain in their own world and to navigate through that and to get a deeper understanding. So the first attempt that we need to have is to remove our own biases. So Clean Coaching has developed a series of questions that are meant to honor the coachee's unique personal experience and wisdom by having questions that are generic and with very little words, and that we keep repeating. So it sounds a bit mechanical if we're not doing it with a good intent. And so yeah, the presence that will make a huge difference as well, like with any coaching tool. So these questions are meant to be non-assumptive, non-suggestive, and non-interpretive. Big words. So I would like us to really be clear on that. What could be an assumptive question? So if you can give me some example, type in the chat, an assumptive question. And that's not to blame you. We all sometimes ask questions that are actually including an assumption already. Just like, how well did you perform last week? Well, we assume that it was actually well. So something where, kind of question where we actually have an assumption. It's not neutral. It's biased by something that I take for granted as true. For example, how was the conversation you had last Friday? So I take for granted that the conversation actually happened last Friday, which may or may not be true. So in that sense, it's an assumption. So any example that you have of an assumptive question? For example, you have in Hong Kong, I have friends who have their children at home for the next 4 weeks, homeschooling. So if I ask a question about, well, how do you enjoy having your children at home? There's an assumption here that I link the joy and having them at home as something that could be actually linked. For some people, it makes sense. For others, that be very leading and very biased. So I let you keep thinking about that. There are some assumptive questions. The second one is suggestive. So what could be a suggestive question? When we are asking a question, but it's actually a suggestion in disguise. You can type in the chat, you know, that's the things like, for example, what about blah, 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 blah. Have you tried blah, 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 blah. That's just a nice suggestion. It's me doing the thinking for the other person. So in that sense, I'm inviting my own solution in the process instead of letting the person finding their own resources and tapping to their internal wisdom. So that's about suggestion, that suggestive questions. Sometimes we call them as well as leading questions. And the last type is about interpretive questions. Yeah, would you talk to your boss? That's a great suggestive question. I assume that talking to the boss is a good thing, and I even invite you to do that. So that's a double one, both assumptive and suggestive. Brilliant. Now, an interpretive question is when I put sense or I give meaning to what the coachee has said, but it is my opinion. It's filtered through my own understanding, through my own bias. Any example around that, where it's actually an interpretive question? I'm stretching your mind not, late in the night, huh? So an interpretive question. It could be something like the person said, well, I'm going to talk to my boss. And your question could be, so you will bring this to your boss and you expect that he will take it into consideration and that together you'll find a solution. Well, this is my expectation that I bring into it, and I even would like the person to validate my understanding. But sometimes I could be so far from the truth, so far from what the person actually thinks. Oh, I once had a coaching session with someone with whom we were working on a professional topic. And then he was well progressing. And one day he told me, you know, Marianne, really good on the business side, on the relationship at work. But what's really is painful now is that I have to deal with moving house. And so I have moved house many times too. So of course I was triggered, and I came with that brilliant interpretive question saying, oh yeah, so how is it with all the packing and all the big furniture that you have to move? That's really complicated. How do you plan to do that? He was taken aside saying, furniture? No, that's not the problem, because we're buying everything new that will deliver in the new house. You know what's complicated? It's to put the gods before we arrive. So I was completely blew up. That was a very good reminder that my question was interpretive, and definitely got not a very good one, because that was in my world and not in the coach's world. So if you have any idea of what could be an example of an interpretive question, feel free to type in the chat. So now I will share with you a few examples of what clean coaching questions are that are non-assumptive, non-suggestive, and non-interpretive. So let me find it and show it to you. Yes, here we are. Maybe I remove that one. No, this is not, okay. Okay, so for example, here we have a series of clean coaching questions. For example, what would you like to have happen? Or for blah, blah, blah to go the way you like. It will be like what? What kind of blah, blah, blah? Is there anything else about blah, blah, blah? When blah, 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 what happens to blah, blah, blah? So you see, every time there are these 3 dots, it's actually repeating or quoting what the person has mentioned. So here there is 0 interpretation on my side. There's 0 assumption from the coach, and there's no suggestion at all. It's just pure inquiry. It's driven by curiosity and driven by a full confidence that the person has what it takes to go and explore deeper in their own wisdom. So these questions are the ones that David Grove and his team has crafted, and they really recommend that we stay with them so that we keep repeating them until helping the person to let things emerge from within. We can combine them anyway, definitely, so that it's not monotonous or mechanical. Yet, we need to have as little input as possible as a coach. So I just pause the share here. Oh no, I just pause for a little bit, asking you, how comfortable are you with that? Or do you have any question? So if you could type in the chat if you're comfortable, or if you have any question just before we actually give it a try to practice it. So up to you to tell me if you're comfortable or any question that you have at this point about this theory. So it looks like Joanne is comfortable. And that we have a deep reflecting audience. Lord Jesus. Great. So given that you're comfortable, now we need to choose where do we want to go next. So is any of you willing to give it a try? I can definitely leave the questions on the screen, and then you give it a try using clean coaching questions and exploring, finding out how does that work and what kind of experience we are offering to the coachee. So raise your hand, there's a button for that, or just type in the chat that you're willing to give it a try, and we're more than happy to promote you as a panelist so that you're here, because we never know what will happen and what will emerge. We will post the recording. That part will not be recorded. So as a coach, you also have, I can use the clean coaching sessions, the clean coaching questions, so that you can reflect around that. So if you could think about the situation that you would like to improve, and think about this situation, if you could explore it a little bit further. What would you like to have happen? Take a deep breath and think about this situation. Instead of that, what would you like to have happen? And thinking about that you like to have happen, for it to go the way you like, what would it be like?
If you can share the PowerPoint slide, it will be useful, Marianne.
I would definitely.
And
that's a good idea. So thinking about your ideal situation, for it to really become exactly as you want, what will it be like? Now, would be really interested to see how you in the audience have noticed how the it articulates what or the process and how you could eventually use it. So I'm keen to hear any feedback, any question, and finding out what would help you to be really comfortable to use it in your own practice if you think that it could be useful. So feel free to type in the chat, otherwise raise your hand and we can definitely hear you, listen to you. Once you raise your hand, and we can bring your face in. Okay, so thank you, Corinne. I'm glad that you will try to practice. It will definitely come with practice. That makes a huge difference. At first, it's a bit mechanical because we are using a really restricted set of questions. And we need to make sure that the person doesn't feel interrogated. That wouldn't really be too nice. So for coaching, it's really about having that presence. And yet here, coming from a place of curiosity and letting the person having as much space as possible with really, really, really very, very few words. So focusing here on the outcome, really on the ideal situation, so that we actually start from a point of resourcefulness, from a point of inspiration, aspiration, where instead of remaining stuck into that current situation where the person have already repeated that scenario so many times in their head and building so many reinforcing beliefs that anyway there's no way out, if we stay there, we're really very drained and completely absorbed by a huge low energy. Whereas if we start from this outcome, from the stream, from the very end, as Viviana really rightly pointed out, it helps to start with a much higher and much more positive in energy. And so in that sense, that's really, really helpful. And clean coaching, in that sense, is helping to stay into that energy and to leverage on this. Yet we start from that, and we are, then the next question is really on the way to go. So the first question nearly all the time is, what would you like to have happen? And the second is, for that blah, blah, blah to happen, it will be like what? And then you really go deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to, be gentle and have as little words as possible. In the clean coaching environment, it's also recommended not to watch or not to look at your coachee. Not that we don't want to have the visual interaction as a sign of presence, but to allow the person to be in their sphere, thinking by themselves. And so allowing them, when they are unfolding it, really to be within. So it's really about looking a little bit out, removing ourselves slightly from the picture so that we give a bigger space to the person. a great way to do that is to have a cup of tea and you let the person explore by actually taking a cup of tea and taking your time, slowing it down so that you have the silence that's welcome, that's occupied, it's not something awkward. And you offer that space that's highly respectful, and you can go deeper without you needing to intervene at all.
So do we relax the person first before we starting to ask clean questions? It's like to hypnotize the person, ask slowly, what kind? Is there anything else about?
Well, it depends on the situation. So for example, when we start on a very high note, where people are already very high in their energy, so the clean coaching can help to go deeper, and we can remain in that high energy and leverage on it. Yet if we see that the person is really in that space where they're a bit prisoner, it's very good indeed, as you suggest, to relax first. But the person may or may not be ready to go there. So it's just about offering it. And if you notice that, you know, sometimes people take, you offer to take 3 deep breaths and just like, okay, shall we start? It's not really that effective. And if you see that the person is not yet ready, it's about more relaxing in the rhythm of the question that you ask, so that yes, you can pace and help the person to pace as well. Because for self-reflection, it's much easier to slow a bit down, so that we can tap into our own wisdom. But for that, we need to be attuned to ourselves and to our heart, our gut. And that requires a slower rhythm, definitely. So Lord Chi mentioned that a cup of tea is a great suggestion. Yeah, it does work. I've seen that from an article in the latest ICF newsletter, with someone saying that silence could be occupied by a cup of tea. And I think that's really very relevant for clean coaching too, when we want to be in the space and yet out of it, present but not intrusive. Great. So if there's any more question, I'm more than happy to answer. Any more sharing, more than happy to hear.
Yes, I just have question that because you want the person to look within and you don't encourage them to look at the coach, and whether it is good idea to ask the person to look down or to.
Here, I guess it's really your own intuition who will tell, in the sense that what I've experienced, people would not need me to direct them. They would, as long as we are asking questions that are quite new or quite thought-provoking, people will easily have the movement of their eyes either very high or very low, and you will notice that the head posture would go a bit deeper too, so they will easily lose eye contact with you. So what I had noticed was way more spontaneous than me needing to insist. It's probably about yeah, being a bit subtle into that, so that we are not imposing.
Okay.
And yet, if we see that the person is trying to please us, right, by trying to give us the right answer, there could be something about trust that we need to recontract or to agree again, so that the person feels safe to go deeper and is doing that for their own sake and for their own benefits, and not in any attempt to please us as a coach or to get validated, because that would really miss the purpose of the coaching session. Thank you for your great question, Viviana.
So perhaps if there is a deep silence, then maybe the coaching is going deeper.
Yeah. Usually when we are face to face, then we can notice that the person is going deeper, and that the silence is not wasted. It's really a time to explore and to self-reflect. It's a bit more tricky when we are over the phone and we don't have the video, when just like we're doing right now. Then the interpretation of silence is a bit more complicated. But we can take for granted that it's a needed space for the person to go deeper. And usually people are so uncomfortable naturally with silence that if, as a coach, I manage to remain silent, I can definitely trust that the coachee will come out of silence once needed. So it's about growing our ability to hold silence without being tempted to occupy it.
I guess you make everybody going deeper with your question.
Yeah, and I guess we had opportunity to ask questions, so we may have now time to close this webinar. I'd be delighted to answer any question later on if needed. We will post the recording on the ACSM YouTube channel and Facebook page. So feel free on these platforms to ask any more questions, or to reach out to us in the through the ACSM platform. ACSM is actually now closing this wonderful ACSM Online Week for 2020. It's our second online week, and it's been a great pleasure to have so many people involved, and it's very, very touching to see so many supervisors contributing and willing to share, and answering very kindly to our offer to come and join us from all over the world. And so we had from UK, we had from Singapore, we had from Canada, we had from Malaysia, we had from Australia. And so everyone sharing so much with our ACSM community and the coaches here in Southeast Asia is very, very heartwarming. So a big thank you to all of you who've been involved. A big thank you to the ACSM team who managed to be here and there for preparing that and offering this platform, no matter what had happened. And sometimes it's always a joy, and yet as in every adventure, some days are a bit easier than others. And so I would love you to take part to the other events that ACSM is offering you all along the year. So you just can easily go to acsm.asia. We have a mentoring week, we have supervision capsules, It's every month, and you are absolutely welcome to join. That'd be a real delight to see you all on these opportunities too. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening, everyone. Looking forward to meet you in the next events.